codes.
I don't know why. That's very interesting. So, okay.
I just updated. It asked me to update Zoom.
Okay, so that might be why. Okay, not a problem. So let me just take care of muting everybody, and then we'll get started. Oh, and yes, this closed. Okay. So last time when we met, which was 2 weeks ago, if I remember right, I ended off with an overview of this upcoming chapter, and I said that it's filled with intrigue, and it is truly a very interesting window into Nehemiah's mind and the minds of those who wanted to cause him all kinds of problems. I gave the general overview because it's one of those chapters. If you just read pasuk by pasuk, you kind of lose the whole story. So we went through the overview. And now what I'd like to do is read the chapter from beginning to end. It's only 19 pasukim. Along the way, pose some questions, and then go back and pick up some of these questions. Good. So again, because I didn't have the video started yet, I wanted to say that again, that tonight we're learning for Refuah Shlema for Noah bat Shimrit, Barak ben Shimrit, and Shimrit bat Chava, the Sheda Refuah Shlema, the Karov. Okay, chapter 6, Parak Vav in Nehemiah. Vayikasher nishmas l'Sanballat v'Tobiah u'leGeshem ha'Arvi u'liyeter oivin. It was when Sanballat, Tobiah, Geshem, the Arab, Aravi, and the rest of their enemies had heard. This is Nehemiah talking in first person, which happens quite a bit. We've seen that already since the beginning of the book. That when they heard that I was rebuilding the wall, and there was no more breaches in the wall, because remember we talked about in the end of the last chapter that the breaches were all closed. And even though the breaches were no longer there, even though the wall has been repaired, yet they have yet to set up the doors in the gateways, in the sharim. Sanballat the Geshem Elai Lemor. Now Sanballat and Geshem sent a message saying the following. It sounds like they're trying to give him an idea. They want to meet with him. What does it say? Lecha v'niva'ada yachtav. Let us come and get together and meet. Bakfirim bebikat Ono. To meet in this area, in the valley of Ono, in a place called Kfirim. V'hema choshim la'asot dira. And very astutely, of course, Nehemiah says they planned on harming me. They planned on doing something bad. How would he know that? Well, as they say, by the way, it's not they, it's Navi. The leopard just doesn't change its spots. And they already saw, and we saw already in the last chapter, the chapter before that Sanballat and his entourage were just not good people, and they always were out to do some harm or cause problems. Pasuk Gimel number 3. And I sent messengers back to them. Look, guys, I know you want to meet. Sorry, I'm busy. I'm involved in some very important building project. And I can't come down to you guys. Because if I stop now, then it's going to be a problem. I won't be able to continue this work. It means like to loosen or to weaken someone's hand, but I don't have the time for you. So in other words, the first rebuff, Nehemiah just says, look, I'm busy. I can't come to you. So what happens? Pasuk Dalet. So he said, Nehemiah said, that the messengers were sent to Nehemiah 4 more times, or a total of 4 times. And I kept telling him the same answer. I can't come to you. Now, if you were, not you, God forbid, but if Sanballat did not have something nefarious in mind, his response after 4 times should have been, fine, I hear you, but this is really important. I'll come to you. You tell me when's a good time. That would be the right thing to do, but that's not what he does. So until now, it's been a total of 4 times. How do I know? Look at the next pasuk. Pasuk Hey, number 5. So Sanballat sent me a message now a 5th time at Na'aro, along with his, or through his servant. V'igeret pitucha biyado. He didn't send him till now, evidently, he had been sending him sealed messages that were meant for your eyes only, meaning for Nehemiah. Now, for some reason, he does not seem to want to keep it secret any longer. The word igeret, we also come across in Megillat Esther and in other places. It was the word that many of us learned when we were growing up, learned that as meant the word letter in place of the word michtav. But igeret pitucha, we would also refer to today. In this case, it could be just an unsealed letter, didn't have any seal on it, or it could also be a page, a paper, or something we would call today a postcard. And in that, why does he leave it open? Why all of a sudden is it not a secret? So we're going to have to come back to that. Pasuk Vav. Katuba, what did it say in this letter? Bagoyim nishma v'gashmu omer. The word has come to the various nations, and Geshem, that's his sidekick, also has said, Ata, you, v'hayudim, you and your Jews, choshim limrod, your real intention is you're planning to rebel. Okay, therefore, Ata bonei achoma, that's why you're building this wall. Ata hovel lahem lemelech kadvarim ha'ele. And therefore, what you're doing really is you're trying to create what we would call facts on the ground, and you want to be their king. That's what you're doing here. So he accuses Nehemiah and his people, or you Jews, as being a fifth column, of being treasonous. Again, all you have to do is go back to about 80 years, go back a couple hundred years, go back 400 years, go back 1,000 years, go back 1,600 years. They just keep going back until the day of Sanballat. And it's a repetitious type of anti-Semitic, as they say, trope. It's you Jews, and you're creating a fifth column. You're trying to be, trying to usurp whatever power it is. And he says, now you'll notice, interestingly enough, I'm just going to mention this now, I'm not going to come back to it later. In the beginning of Pasuk Vav, we just read, he changes his name from Geshem to Gashmu. So the word Gashmu is a diminutive. It's like instead of saying David, it was Davidaleh. Okay, like he's trying to say, look, me and my best buds, look, we know the score. We know what you're really planning here. And that's what was written in this, when he says Katvarim ha'ele, that's Nehemiah saying, this is what was written in this letter. Pasuk Zayin. You also have set up prophets, Nevi'im in Yerushalayim, to proclaim about you. What were they going to say? Melech Yehuda. There's a king of Yehuda. Yishama lemelech kadvarim ha'ele, v'ata lechani va'atza yachtav. Says you've also put it in place a series of prophets, and these prophets are going to say there's a king in Yehuda, meaning Nehemiah, and that you should know. Look, buddy, I'm really trying to help you out here. I have your best interest in hand, because I think that all this is going to get back to our king, and let's talk. I want to help you. So first he makes, in the first part of this letter, he makes it sound like he's making these accusations, and he's going to take action against him because of that. Now he uses those accusations of, you're trying to usurp power, you're going to be making yourself a king, and saying, well, by the way, I don't want you to get in trouble with the king. Artashasta, I'll help you out. But we need to meet face to face. We really need to talk about this. Yud Aleph. I'm sorry, Chet. And of course, Nehemiah is no fool. I sent a message back to him saying, none of these things that you're saying has happened. What are you smoking? Give me a break. Okay, these are literally made up in your head, or we would say figments of your imagination. You're just inventing stuff. Where do you come up with this? This is the kind of thing, and I don't mean this in anything other than the literal meaning. This is the kind of person and the actions and the statements that Goebbels, Yamach Shemo, would have been very proud of, because this was his job. He was the master of propaganda against the Jews. And this is what he's trying to do, the master of propaganda against the Jews. We saw it in Parak Daled, Parak Hey, and now in Parak Vav. And now he's using the propaganda to theoretically help the Jews, which of course we know he has bad intentions because we talked about that last time. Now, kichulam miyarimotam. For this is Nehemia talking now to you and me, and says, really all their plan was to make us afraid, to intimidate us. Lemor saying, they will try, well, we're going to try to get them to stop working. This is what Nehemia is saying, that the goal of Sanballat and his people was to get us to stop working. So what happens is, he says their plan is to weaken us, to weaken me, to stop us in building and finishing this wall up completely with the gates and everything else. And look at the end of this pasuk, now chazek et yadai, strengthen my hands. So in a sense, now he's saying to his people that it's going to have the opposite effect. You think, Mr. Sanballat, he doesn't send this message back to him, but you think that you're going to try and scare me and intimidate me. What you have just accomplished is to strengthen me as well. He doesn't say it exactly in those words. Pasuk Yud, long pasuk. Vani vati bet Shmaya ben Delaya ben Mehatav El. I then went and visited Shmaya ben Delaya, who was from the house of Mehatav El. V'hu atzur. He was housebound. He was stuck in his house. Now, first of all, I'm not going to answer the questions now. Who is this man he's going to visit? Why is he going to visit him? Why is he stuck in his house? It's not COVID, so what's he stuck in his house for? We'll come back to these questions. Vayomer, and he said, Nivaed el Beit Elohim el toch ha'echal. Said, you know what? I have an idea. Let's meet at the Beit HaMikdash, in the Hechal, in the sanctuary, which means the Beit HaMikdash had basically been finished. And what we'll do is we'll close the doors of the sanctuary of the Hechal, because they're coming to kill you. And actually, they're coming by night to kill you. So this is now is this Shemaiah telling the message from Sanballat? Is this Shemaiah saying you should meet there with me in the Heichal? Well, he's stuck in his house. How's that work? Okay, but the basic idea here is that someone is planning to try to meet, in quotes, and we'll see why in a second, to meet with Nehemia in the actual Beit HaMikdash, because there it's going to be secret, we can meet. Problem with that. How is it a problem? Nehemia is not a Kohen. He couldn't go in a spot where he's being asked to meet. He understands already it's a setup. Well, wait a minute. Why isn't he suspicious of this person, Shemaiah? Again, it goes back to why is he in his house in the first place. We'll come back to that. Pasuk Yud Aleph, number 11. Va'umra, and I said, Haish kamoni yivrach? You think I'm going to just run away? You think I'm scared? Umi chamoni asher yavo leichal. And how am I supposed to go into the Beit HaMikdash and live into this area he was asked to go to? He wouldn't be allowed to. I could live there. Lo, though I can't go there. I'm not going there. So he's telling us two things in this moment. Number one, he's realizing he's being set up. Number two, he's also standing his ground further. He says that I'm not running from anything, dude. I'm not running from anything. You'd bet the continuation of this idea. Vakira, and I realized, V'nei lo Elohim shelacho, was not Hashem that sent this man Shemaiah, because maybe he thought he was a shaliach of Hashem until this point. He says, but what he said about me, that supposed prophecy, there's no prophecy about, oh, they're going to come and kill you tonight. It was only Tovia and Sanballat who paid him to do this. Why? Next pasuk is the end of the sentence. Leman sachurhu, because he was just a person who was hired. He was a hired gun, a mercenary. Leman ira ve'eseken, so that I should be intimidated and act on it. V'chatati, and I will commit a sin because I will go where I'm not allowed to go. And then there'll be a reason. This caused a scandal and caused a problem for me personally. I can't go in there. So what happens here? And these 2 or 3 people came together. When he comes to this man Shemaya's house, again, why is he there? Who is this man? Why is he stuck in his house? We'll see. Secondly, at the beginning, he thinks maybe there's some nevuah here. He says, look, we'll meet. Maybe you're going to meet Sanballat or whoever it is. You're going to meet in the Beit HaMikdash and you're going to stand in the Heichal. And then he knows right away. No. This is no nevuah. This is no prophecy. This is something I'm being set up. And in addition to that, you're not intimidating me. I'm not running away from anybody. In Chicago, those of you familiar at all with even a drop of Chicago's political history, there were 2 long reigning mayors in Chicago. There was Mayor Daley, the senior, and Mayor Daley, Richard M. Daley and Richard J. Daley. Richard II, who was mayor not that many years ago, I thought was fantastic. The other original recipe of Richard Daley was what became known as the machine, the Democratic machine in Chicago. There's a man who wrote a book. I knew the guy who wrote a book. It was about the whole Democratic machine and Daley and everything. He called it "Don't make no waves, don't back no losers." It was all about political intrigue and how you get your way and how you twist words and make people think what they're supposed to think. Amazing book. And it comes to mind, Lahavdil, when I see what Sanballat knows. You take a person who hates the Jews. That, I'm not saying Daley did, God forbid, he was a good person about that. You take a person who hates the Jews, Sanballat and his people. You take political machinations. You take the concept that there's still prophecy in the Jewish time at this point. Because remember, prophecy doesn't end until a little while into Bayit Sheni. We're still talking a prophetic time. And Nehemia could be on this suspicion, well, maybe he's being told he really should do until he hears, go where he's not supposed to go. And then he says, game's over. Let's take a look now at Pasuk Yud Dalet. He turns to Hashem. Zachra Elohai leTovia leSanballat k'ma'asav. Remember Tovia and Sanballat, what they have done. Eile, k'ma'asav eile, these actions. V'gam leNoadia haNevi'ah u'liyeter haNevi'im asher hayu miyarim oti. Also to someone named Noadia. We haven't heard this person's name yet. And to other prophets, and this is not a real prophet, it's in quotes, who are trying to intimidate me. Please remember what they did. What does that mean? He says, it's in your hands, God. You are going to be the one who will please take action against them. The parak ends, it's coming to a conclusion, and tells us something interesting. Pasuk Tetvav. Vatishlam hachoma be-25 le'elul. The wall was finished on the 25th day of Elul. L'chamishim yom. It took 52 days to repair it. So I'm going to ask you a question. If you think you know the answer, please take yourself off mute. Why is the 25th of Elul critical? Why is it a critical date in history, in Jewish history or history? I'll take Elul for 50. Okay. So let's think of it like this. When we stand in Shul on Rosh Hashanah, we say Hayom Harat Olam. Unless you daven in Havara Ashkenazis, then it's Hayom Haras Olam, which means today the world was destroyed, God forbid. But Hayom Harat Olam means that today is the day the world was born, which sounds like on the day of Rosh Hashanah, the world was created, but that's not true. The world was actually created on 25th of Elul. Wait a minute. So it was created on the 25th of Elul. And so how does that work out with that? This isn't a philosophical class today, but it's just very interesting to note that I didn't look in the commentaries. I'm sure it's mentioned there, but the fact that the wall that was there to protect the Jews in the spot where the Shekhinah would reside to a certain degree was concluded. It doesn't have to tell us when it was, but it does tell us on the 25th of Elul to make potentially a connection between that the day that Adam HaRishon was created, because we believe that Adam was created on Rosh Hashanah. Hayom Harat Olam, today the day was born, the world was born because it was the creation of man and humanity. And by the way, humanity is not a PC word, just words, just it was the beginning of humanity, humankind. Because you know me, I'm not PC at all. So the fact that it was created, the wall was finished on the 25th of Elul, coincides with the date that the world, the physical world, Shamayim Ba'aretz, was created. Okay, next couple of psukim. It was when all our enemies heard of this, that the wall was completed, that all the enemies that were around us, and they were intimidated themselves now. They realized this work was accomplished through the hand of God, or the help of God. Why? Why would they realize that? So I mentioned a couple weeks ago, I think it was in this class, that sometimes, not sometimes, very often, there are items that happen in Jewish history that are so obvious, the Yad Hashem, and only can be explained with the hand of Hashem, that there's no other explanation. Case in point that I mentioned, I think again a couple weeks ago, was the 6-Day War. Every war that Israel's ever been in, especially the 6-Day War, Yom Kippur War, but especially the 6-Day War, come back to it because of the miraculous battle, the victories, etc. It was recognized that in spite, against all odds, against everything that was happening, because now it seems to become a very public attempt to prevent this from happening, and yet it still happens. And this is people that were in galut, in exile, now come back and do this, that the hand of God was involved here. God helped them. Next couple of psukim. Gamba Yamin, this is Yod Zayin 17. Gamba Yamim Mahem Marbim Chore Yehuda Igrotehem, Olchot Al Tovia, Lashel Tovia Baot Alehem. In those days also, the upper crust, the nobility of Yehuda, kept writing back and forth to Tovia. Why? Because many people in Yehuda is Judea, is the area of Yerushalayim, were buddies with him. Because he was the son-in-law of Shechania ben Arach, and his son, Yehochanan, Lakachet bat Meshulam ben Berechia, who was married to the daughter of Meshulam ben Berechia. Well, who cares? We will see. Gam tovotav hayu ombrim lefanai, dvarai hayu motzim li lo igarot shalach tovia yareni. They would also speak good of him, about him to me. My people right here in Yehuda, they would come to me, Nehemia, and say, oh, he's such a good person. And yet at the same time, they would tell Tovia about my own personal life and what I was doing. And they sent letters, and Tovia continued to send letters to intimidate me. So it's not like the thing ends here. It's not like all of a sudden the wall is finished, and hooray, and everything's wonderful, and the Goyim and the non-Jews and the Jews all realize, oh, Me'et Hashem. It wasn't that simple, because there's still problems. We still have our own fellow Jews who seem to be friendly with someone like Tovia, who was not a good person. We would liken some of these people who were friendly to Tovia to Shalom Achshav and all these other organizations, these left-wing organizations that feel that you have to, just fill in the blanks. Okay, we're going to go now and return back to the beginning of the chapter. I'm going to put onto the computer, onto the screen, where is it? Oh, it helps, I think, if I open it first. Just a minute. One moment, please. I can't share something that's not on my screen, so I have to first put it on my screen. Okay, now I can come back to you and share. Here we go. Okay. So in Pasuk Daled, we saw that he sent 4 times, he sent messengers with a similar message that he wants to meet. So let's take a look at this. Is all tonight's slides are going to, I think, are all going to be from the Dat Sofrim. It wasn't just they kept saying the same thing, just, okay, let's just try it again and try it again. It wasn't stam. Ela nimuka midei pam mochachot al nechitzut. What happened was, evidently, it wasn't just he sent the same piece of information to Nehemiah. We need to meet. I want to help you. We need to meet. Evidently, each time there was a little bit more. Look, we need to meet because such and such might happen. We need to meet because even if that doesn't happen, this might happen. They, the enemy, had a lot of patience. Because 4 round trips could have taken up to 4 weeks altogether. Now, where were they coming from and all? I can't tell you. Pasuk Yud Zayin, as we'll see, appears from the Pasuk Yud Zayin. Evidently, Tovia had set specific messengers. Their job was to be a mail carrier, deliverer. So therefore, he didn't have any problem, sending more and more and more letters. He says, I responded. Also, what Nehemiah responded each time was not necessarily the exact same wording. He couldn't just say, okay, ditto, what I said last time. He must have also, this is his assumption, that's so free, that he had to change his words. By the way, just as an aside, I think because it'll make a little bit of a connection here with our class. I had to not have class last night because I said a colleague of mine in Chicago had passed away. There was a Rabbi, Reuven Gross, Zichrono Livracha, was a Rav of a shul, teacher, and amazing individual, exactly my age. And I had mentioned before that that I knew that that's so free in the commentary. I knew his grandson or great grandson. I forgot which it is. So the Dad So Free was written by this person who just passed away yesterday or 2 days ago. This was his great grandfather or grandfather. I forgot which one it is. So there's a connection for our class too. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. Let me move this up. Starting where it says Al Kain. Get my Navi here just a minute. One second. I'm gonna find the pasuk this is on. Why can't I find it? I thought I had it circled. Okay. Let me come back to this one. Sorry. Let me come back to this one. Make this bigger. We're going to deal with, oh no, I found it. I'm sorry. Apologies. Let's go back. Pasuk Vav. I'm going to go back to Pasuk Vav. Take a look at this last slide that I so quickly just pushed off to the side. Pasuk Vav, it said, Katuba bagoyim nishma v'gashmu omer. Hey, this is like that 5th letter now, the one that was an open letter that was no longer a secret because evidently at this point, Sanballat was throwing caution to the wind. He was going to do anything he could. And he said that, by the way, just you should know, they say on the streets, and I heard from my buddy Gashmu, Mr. Gashmu, that you Jews, you're planning on rebelling, and therefore, that's why you're building this wall. So now let's take a look at that frame. And the obvious question should be, what do you mean, oh, that's why you're building the wall? Because you're planning on rebelling. How about security? Why shouldn't that be the reason? That should be a plain, simple reason. So it says that they did not see any value, they meaning Sanballat and his crew, did not see any value to personal security with that wall. Or they're just disregarding it on purpose. What do they see this wall as? Just some political tool. In regular times, wouldn't make any sense under normal circumstances, in a normal time, to plan some kind of rebellion with just one little fort or fortress. Because we're not talking about a big wall that went on the entire city. It was the area around the area of the Beit HaMikdash generally. So it wouldn't make sense to say, oh, this is what they're going to be rebelling because they're building a fort. Kamur, advarim mechuvanim, l'mashaya be'etahi. This is, the words are really aimed at the time that was happening now. because the kingdom was starting to fall apart. In such a time when the Persian government was starting to come apart, had there been some gathering of people in any one place for a lengthy period of time, it could be that they were going to help the enemies of the Persians that were around them. They would be able to engage lots of soldiers. They could also have maybe even asked help from the Syrian Greeks. Boy, we've heard these people before. We just finished celebrating our victory over them. So what's going on here? What is he telling us? So let's picture Israel. And imagine for a moment, there was a plan that Israel was going to rebel as a whole against the Persian government. And along comes Sanballat and says, hey, you're building a little wall, you're building this wall, this fortress around the city of Jerusalem, not even the city of Jerusalem, even something smaller, the general area of Har HaBayit area. Oh, you guys are rebelling against the king. That's this fifth letter. He says, that really doesn't make any sense. Tachlis, it makes no sense. He says, but what was happening now, you put it into the perspective of history, what was happening. Evidently, at this point already, the Persian government was starting to lose control of their countries and of their different kingdom places that they were ruling. And it says, as a result of that, what could have been seen is any one place where there was gathering of people and building of resources as maybe someone who was ready to pounce and help the other enemies of the Persians to help them. Where have we seen something like that before? Right now, this week we're in Parshat Vayigash. Next week is Vayichi, and then we're going to come to Parshat Shemot. Hava nitzchak malo, right? What does Paro say? We have to outsmart these Jews. Why? Because maybe there's going to be an enemy that's going to come up against us Egyptians, and these servants of these slaves of ours, these Jews will join them and to try and conquer us. Again, over and over and over in Jewish history, we see the same repetition of potential claims against us. Now, this is what we go to here. Now, we saw that Nehemiah goes to his house, the man's house, Shemaiah, and also that he was Atzur Beveito. He was locked up in his house. He was stuck in his house. Let's see. We don't know who he is. All of a sudden, his name pops up. Vani bati bet Shemaiah. L'shemahu ba lebeito. Why does Nehemiah come to this man's house? It seems that his original intention of coming to his house was to take counsel with him. He was an important man. And originally, he was a supporter of Nehemiah. Evidently, it was something normal and common for Nehemiah to go and take counsel with him. But now he's changed his tune. Under the influence of Sanballat, he started to have not doubts, but to hem and haw. He wasn't so sure anymore. Sanballat was getting into his head. It was a mind game. He said, I know, look, you have this friend, Nehemiah, Mr. Shemaiah, you're friends with him. And I know he takes counsel with you, but you got to know the truth. He's not such a good person. And it worked its way into Shemaiah's brain. And it identifies Shemaiah, the son of so-and-so, the son of so-and-so. Why? He mentions the name in the perspective of two full generations before him. Why? It wants us to know that it wasn't just some guy that Nehemiah normally had taken counsel with. It was someone who was very chashuv. Remember, it's Nehemiah himself that's writing this. He points this out in his book to show us that even the people who were important, people who were hopefully above the fray, were also able to be swayed by Sanballat. Because the words that they were saying and how the picture that Sanballat was painting of Nehemiah seemed to have been to some people, and now we see to Shemaiah, more believable, more reasonable, more mat'im than what they saw themselves of Nehemiah, or what they knew of him. Shepal baruach elyonah. V'chol mi shelo haya ba'al ruach kazo lo tafas et malach ha'inyanim. Now, we're going to come back to this idea of how people, what does it mean that that a person can get sucked in and I can have their mind, their mind changed about someone who's perfectly good. We're going to hopefully still get to that tonight. But let's first deal with this. He was stuck in his house. Zohaz lama hu holech lebeit bayit shel adam prati ve'no mazmino elav. First of all, why is it Nehemiah, who was like the leader, goes to his house? Why doesn't he invite him to come to him? So he said, first, I'll tell you why. Because he's stuck in his house. Because since Nehemiah was the pecha, he was the governor. He had an official standing here. It wasn't just because he was the leader of the Jews. So therefore, Shmaiah should have been summoned to him. But he goes to Shmaiah because Shmaiah is stuck in his house. For some reason, he's going to give us a couple possibilities, what he thinks. He was stuck in his house. And he couldn't come to the governor, meaning Nehemiah. Maybe he wasn't that he was stuck there, but it was some form of asceticism, that he was trying to be a hermit and stay away from society. Maybe always Nehemiah, when he wanted to seek counsel from Shmaiah, he would go to his house. Maybe something very simple. Maybe Shmaiah was very elderly, much more so than Nehemiah. Because Sanballat invited, because after Sanballat talked to Shmaiah, he felt, I need to talk to Nehemiah. It's also possible when he came to him, when Nehemiah came to Shmaiah, it was not necessarily to take counsel, but just to visit or for some other reason. Maybe he was just coming to visit him because he was friendly with him and he was sick. Let's move this over. Move this here. There we go. So after a little back and forth, and he realizes that he's being set up, something's not right. He doesn't start off by saying, no, I'm not going to go up to the jig is up. I figured what you want to do. What's the first thing he says? And this is really an important lesson in manhigut, or leadership. It's a rhetorical question. A person like me should run away? Now, what does he mean by a person like me? Does he mean because he's so important? Does he mean because he's such a big leader? He means, in a sense, a person who is a leader. A leader doesn't run away. Concept of running away, of retreat to save your own self is prohibited to somebody whose job is to be in charge. Lamod al mishmar literally means to stand guard. Even if he's putting his own life in danger. Let's say you have a person who is the president of a country. And he has bodyguards, multiple bodyguards. If there's a threat that's coming after, there's a clear and present danger. The bodyguard doesn't run away. The job is, if necessary, to take a bullet for that person. That's their job that they signed up for. As a leader, when things get tough, he can't just run away from his leadership position. Probably one of the greatest examples we could see with this was Shaul HaMelech. Now, let's continue. If you remember, Shmuel informed Shaul. Shmuel was already dead. And through necromancy, he was raised from the dead and told Shaul that tomorrow he's going to be with him, meaning he's going to die in the next battle. Nevertheless, he still went to battle. Now, if you remember, when we were learning Sefer Shmuel many, many years ago, I had spoken about the fact that I had said many negative things about Shaul and that was turned out to be very much out of place. I was wrong about that. And this, I think, is a very important point here. That in spite of the human failings and leadership quality failings in some cases that Shaul possessed, at the end of the day, when it really counted, he stepped up, even knowing that his own life was going to be in danger. We saw the same thing, by the way, when it came to Moshe Rabbeinu. I'm surprised by that he did mention Moshe, because when it came to Moshe Rabbeinu, Hashem himself told him, you're going to fight the battle against Midian, and then you're going to die. And we see that in the Psukim, the people knew, the Am Yisrael knew this, and Moshe had to force them to give people to bring soldiers out to go to battle. So he says here, Miknei, why did Shaul go to battle knowing he was going to die? He understood that this was an essential battle to scare the living daylights out of the Plishtim. He knew he wasn't going to survive, but he understood also that it was a critical fight that had to take place. Okay. This is really important. We said that he understood, he meaning Nehemia understood, that Shmaya was hired. It was a hired hand to do this. So he says like this. Hakavana l'schirut smuya. Like he was like under the table, very quietly, he was hired. Aidei tovot hana'a shonot, maybe through different favors from Sanballat to Shmaya. Sheni kulo anashim ele, that these people bestowed upon him. Kamul alam pasuk yitet. Ad she'yagish kesher shehakarat tova lahem, to the point where he getting all these favors. Shmaya kept getting all these good things and cigars and wine. I'm just making this up, obviously, and free passes behind to the stage passes to the newest plays. He kept getting to the point where he felt a sense of gratitude. He started to give weight to the hashkafa, the perspective, the outlook of Sanballat and his people. As we've seen with other situations, when a person might be in a position of power or leadership, or someone who has ability to sway others, sometimes gets dragged down by being even bribed, but not so outward. Parentheses, this is what I want to make sure we said. These words are written here so we taught the following. This kind of thing, don't ever say it could never happen to me. If there's ever a disagreement, and suddenly for whatever reason you have some involvement and you can be involved in that machloket to help it, to solve it, to resolve it, and suddenly one of them, even something very benign, starts giving something to you, doing something special for you, could sway you, you should not be involved in that. Tell you a true story. With that, I'm going to close. Before I became the rabbi of Shul, many of you know, I worked 17 years in the business world. Most of that time, I was a director of purchasing for two companies, one for 15 years, one for 2 years. Over the years, twice, someone tried to, what we'd say, bribe me. One time, one of the main products I would purchase was steel, sheet steel, different thicknesses, different gauges of steel. And I had 2 suppliers or 3 suppliers I ordered from. And I got a call from a friend one day. Look, my friend is a salesman for a steel company. I know you love buy a lot of steel. At least let him try, come in there and give you a bid. I said, you know what, as a favor to you, I'm happy to do that. Guy came in, gave me his whole pitch. His price wasn't so bad. And then he said, okay, Zev, what is it going to take to get your business? And 100% in a joke, and he knew it, my face, I said, a new car in my driveway. And he moved over like this. He said, that can be arranged. And I threw him out. At that point, I already had a little bit of experience in my life. But my second year on this job, there was a guy who was trying to pitch. We had to buy, for whatever reason, ring binders, thousands and thousands of ring binders for whatever it was used for. And this guy came in to give me a quote. And then as an aside, we were all done talking about the price and everything. He says, look, by the way, I also happen to have a property in Florida. And I want to tell you, I'm more than happy to have you and your wife on me for special. I know you'd probably like to get a nice little getaway, spend a few days there, and it's on me 100%. I was too green to say to myself, whoa, that's something that's a big red flag. I said, oh, that sounds nice. And it wasn't until like the next day that I realized what this guy was trying to do. It was an outright bribe. Thank God 99.999% of people I dealt with did not do that. There were some idiots and some nice people, but for the most part, I never had an issue with bribes. But the point is that at any point in time, someone could get sucked in something as simple as just, a couple of tickets. By the way, many organizations and businesses have rules. You can't take anything from a vendor unless it's consumable within 24 hours, all kinds of rules. We added rules to I actually saw it. We added certain rules to our company that I was working for. But his point here is, why is this mentioned here in the Navi? Very specific reason, because it's to teach us a lesson. No matter how good you are, he must have been a good person, Shemaiah, because remember, Nehemia went in for advice in the past. Now all of a sudden he's trying to hurt him and trick him. And people can change. You have to keep your eyes open at all times. If something doesn't smell right, walk away from it. Tov, have a wonderful evening. It's normally Sunday night when we meet, so I will say Shavua Tov still. Hope you all had a wonderful Hanukkah. And Bezrat Hashem, we shall meet hopefully next Sunday night, if all goes well. Have a great evening, everybody.